Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our YouTube channel and our newsletter and our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, Phil Italy, and Abitativa Casa. And today I have a great guest who was born in Italy and adopted in America, Santo Marabella. So welcome, Santo. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bob. That's my pleasure.
So you're the second person that I've interviewed that was born in Italy and adopted in America. I don't know. Do you know John? And I'm going to mess up his name. Campitelli?
Capitelli?
Yeah.
I do. I do. John's an amazing person and a wonderful resource for folks who have been adopted from Italy and has really helped a lot of folks. I had already found most of the information about my biological family, but he has been very instrumental in the process we're going through now, but also to so many people. He's just a great person.
Yeah, he's a super person. And I know he helps people and he does it out of the goodness of his heart. And I guess he was probably born right around the same time you were, right? If I remember correctly.
I think he's a little bit younger,
Yeah, a little bit, but
but
not too
but
much.
around the same, yeah, around the same time. And I think he was born in Milan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. Uh, so how did your story play out? How old were
Sure.
you first when you were brought to America?
Well, I don't remember it, but I feel like I do from all the times that I've heard the story. So I was born in Aosta, Italy, which is the northwest on the border of Chamonix, France, in May of 1960, yeah. And born in the what was called the Instituto Asistenza Materna e Infantile, if I'm pronouncing it halfway right. And at this institution, similar to an orphanage, but those babies who were not whose mother did not consent to give the name, no essere consentare nominata, or something like that. So on the birth certificates, there would usually be the name of a mother, and there was none. So that was some of us then were born in that institute. I was adopted 11 months later, came to America by my parents, Anna and Sam Marabella, who adopted me through Catholic Charities and became officially adopted. And I guess 2 years later. Final adoption was 2 years later. And I do remember this part. 4 years old, being told that I was adopted, and the way my parents did it was so gentle and wonderful and so untraumatic. um, they said to me that they said a little bit about, we wanted to have children, but mommy couldn't have children, or we couldn't have children ourselves. So we did what we call adopt, and that means we got to pick you, and you're special to us, and you're our child. And I do remember saying, "Are you going to give me back?" And they're like, "No, no, no, no. You, you are ours forever." And they said, "You're just like Jimmy." And Jim was still a friend today, one of my dearest friends, who was next door neighbor. He said, "Just like Jimmy and his family, you'll always be ours." I'm like, "Okay, can I go back and play now?" So you can see the depth of the trauma, right? Um, I did find out more as I grew up, and that I couldn't eat solid foods. I couldn't sit up. I had a flat head, which I think I still have, pretty much have one, and that was from being in the crib. And I'm sure I was attended to as best they could at the time, as well as the other babies. But I was part of that era of what they call the baby scoop. And so what our research has found out is that between 1959 and 1965, 3,700 Italian babies were, I say exported, were adopted to the United States. So there was, I mean, it happened more than those years, and it happened in other places in Europe as well. I just know that that's how I fit into this whole big picture.
So so that institute, was that like a maternity place for unwed mothers or something like that?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, and I'm working on my Italian, it was always pretty rough. It's a little bit better. But the Istituto was a brevetrofio, which is different than an orfanotrofio. An orfanotrofio, the children, the babies are identified as the son or daughter of so and so, so a certain person. In the Brave for Trofeo, they are not identified. That goes back to what I said about not being, an, not having an official name. And in fact, the nuns who took care of the babies made up names. I came over with a wristband, like the old hospital bands, and it had on it Daniele Resi, Resi, which was the I always thought was the name of my family when I started to search and found out. No, in fact, it was the the name that they needed to give every child had to have a name on their birth certificate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, my children are adopted,
Hmm.
um, but from Florida, not
Sure.
from Italy. But we had looked into foreign adoption too at the time, and we were thinking potentially Paraguay at the time, and and again, there's a lot of Italians and Germans there. I mean, the European heritages, and especially in Paraguay,
Hmm.
is very prominent. Um, but they said the problem that they would have there sometimes is that the bishops, in one instance, and I don't know if it was, I don't remember exactly if it had happened or they were afraid it was going to happen, but they said there was one bishop in particular uh, that was saying that we were taking the babies for parts in America from the pulpit. Nice guy,
Yeah.
really
Um,
solid kind of character. Right?
yeah. Well, the Catholic Church took some responsibility for their role. I think it was back in 2016. They the church officially apologized to women in the UK for the actions that led to those kinds of situations where unmarried mothers, unmarried women were um, either coerced, forced, pressured, shamed into giving up their babies.
No kidding. Oh boy,
And
I didn't
I
know
was
that. That.
that's part of that baby scoop, uh,
Hmm.
the scooping up of babies that I I don't know the motivation. You know, I try to be somewhat understanding, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, I
Yeah,
suppose.
exactly.
So now you're adopted. You're adopted from Italy. So how did you? Well, when did you? And how did you start doing the research to find out
Yeah.
who at least your birth mother was?
Um, I I had always wondered, and quite honestly, my parents, and when I say parents, I mean my adopted parents. I never make the distinction of adopted versus bio versus. If I use the term parents, it's Anna and Sam, the loving parents that I had growing up. They told me what they knew. They knew I had an older brother and an older sister. They in fact tried to adopt all three of us to keep us together, but the biological parents kept my older brother and older sister. So I had basic names and I think birth dates perhaps at that time. At some point I got birth dates. During college is when I really started to consider search in earnest. It I was 18, but it really wasn't as much about my age, although I came to learn that that was a big factor in what information you could or could not get. And my parents were never an obstacle to that, but I was curious. It took me about 5 years through maybe the second year of college, until after I graduated a few years. And I found, I guess, enough information, paying off churches, paying off governments, paying off, whatever you had to, and going through a lot of bureaucracy. I have to say, the American side, the consulates, the Congress, the folks here were really helpful and really put a lot of effort. As we're doing this film, as you know, I'm doing a lot of going through old files and things, and I realized how many letters and how many pieces of correspondence I had with our local congressman's office and different branches of government. And so you have to remember that was probably late 70s, early 80s, and it was still very much a closed scenario. I do remember going to Catholic social services in our diocese and to find more information. And they told me that I would get non-identifying information, which turned out to be the caseworker coming out with a folder, manila folder, taking one piece of yellow line paper and reading to me the editorial that had been written about the biological parents and how they were not responsible and what they did not do and what they, and that how fortunate I was, et cetera, et cetera. Not exactly it, and they had the power. I mean, they had everything there in that folder. You don't you don't quite get over that um, what I would consider oppression because people who have power over your life that you don't have power over, that really they don't have a right to have power over. And I get that the reasons why it was so confidential and the term closed adoptions, perhaps maybe parents would not give up children or be open to adoption. I'm not here to judge or even assess if that's a good policy. I can just speak from my experience as an adoptee. It's not good. It's not fair. It's not right. And the new generation of adoptees feels from the little I've talked with folks in that community, the millennials in that community, they're not happy about that. And they're not happy about how closed it still is and how others continue to make decisions around their life. So I didn't get help from the church. Um, Coincidentally, I'm still not getting help from the church as we go through this process. Um, there's either a lack of responsiveness or the responses are no. And I'm not surprised. Um, by the way, this has nothing to do with my relationship with God or my spirituality. I recognize the church is an organization of human beings who are imperfect. It's not a big deal against the church. It's just this piece of it is really, I think it's wrong. I think it's immoral, the way it's handled. I did find information. I was supposed to go to a wedding in 1985, and it was a dear, dear friend from my hometown who went to grade school and high school together, and she studied abroad in Spain and wound up going back to live and work. Excuse me. And was being married in August of 1985. So I planned to go. That's how close we were. And I thought this might be a good opportunity. So I went earlier, did not tell my parents. And I'll explain that in a minute. Did not tell my parents. Um, Went to Madrid, stayed with them for a day or two, drove from Madrid to Genoa by myself, which I can't even imagine doing that today or at this age or at any age. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was fine. No problems. Um, longer, very long story, as quick, as short as I can make it. The consulate in Genoa and the comune, which is the town hall in my town in Aosta, the people there were wonderful and helped. And eventually, I did get the information of where they live. Went to visit them, met my biological parents, met my older sister and older brother, stayed in touch, tried to visit every few years. A younger brother found me about 9 years, 8, 9 years later, and met him. And then we have a younger sister that I learned that we had that no one had met, and found her, but she, at the time, 20 years ago, was the last time I was there. And at the time, she chose not to have any contact. So I'm reaching out to her again. Things change in 20 years. You never know, right?
Sure,
But
sure, sure.
of course,
So now I have to ask you,
yeah,
did you just show up on their doorstep one day?
yep, kind of did that. Do you remember? You remember the musical Sound of South Pacific?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's a character called Bloody Mary,
Yes, I
and she
remember.
was
Yeah.
a short, stout woman, long, beautiful hair, sun-baked skin. So I went to this apartment building, and the first time I walked, the first door was closed, locked. Like it was you had to have the key or access to get into the building. Right. Not uncommon. So I went for a walk, and about an hour or two later, came back, and the door was ajar. So if you believe in fate,
I believe, no, there's no accidents. I firmly believe there's no accidents.
and I believe in having guardians and guides and God and all these wonderful things too. So I go in and I go up the staircase, and it was on I thought it was the second, I think it's the second floor. So I'm in a stairwell between the first and second floor. Should I go up? Should I go? I knew the apartment number. At least an hour I was standing there. And then all of a sudden, this woman comes who looks like this character. She had two shopping bags. And in Italian, I had my little speech ready. And in Italian, I said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Signora Augustino." And I knew that that was the the surname of the mother. In Italian, she said, "That's me." I'm like, okay. So I said, well, I told her my name. I told her I was from the United States. I said I was born in Italy, in Aosta, the birth date, my birth date, and I'm your son. And she's like, no, no. I said, well, I know I have an older brother. His name is this, and he was born in this day, and an older sister. Her name is this. And now she's like, okay, takes me into the apartment and shows me this picture of what looked to be like a 7-year-old, and who looked a little bit like me, but it wasn't me because I left at 11 months, 3 weeks. She goes, in Italian, this is you. I'm like, well, to myself thinking, oh my God, I'm in the wrong house. It's all right. And I said in Italian that, excuse me, I left when I was almost 1 year old. And then I saw the wheels turning, and she nodded, and she called Francesca, and out emerges this young woman who looked to be a year or two older than me. And the woman says, "Who is this?" And she said, "It's your brother." And she said, "Miguele." And the mother goes, "No, the another one." So they would have been too young to even know about me. Well, yeah, shock everybody. So my sister takes my arm and she says, "Okay, we're gonna go. We have to meet your brother." And we go to the piazza, and he was at the time selling. He was working at a newsstand. The same conversation. Who's this? It's our brother. Migueli? No, another one. I stayed there about a week in a hotel, and spent most of my time with them. It was wonderful. It was good. It was comfortable. Um, but it was sad because finally finding them, and then a week later, I'm losing them again. So we made I think I said to my sister and brother, even though we're going to be going, I'll be going back. I said, sempre insieme. I said, we will always be together. Sempre insieme. Yeah. And we did, write letters back and forth. And this is pre our technology of today. And did pretty well. But I mean, every conversation, whether it was on the phone, was like, I had the dictionary and I'm like, oh, un momento, aspetta, aspetta. I'm trying to find, oh my goodness. It was, at least when Zoom came in, not Zoom, but I mean, online video chat came into being, I could use my hands because you can see I do that a lot, and I could get across the communication as well as could my siblings. So I went back a few times, met the younger brother who found me, met him. He has some challenges, had some challenges. I'm still trying to find where he is because he had some issues with addiction, and the younger sister we're still trying to find as we're embarking on this latest journey.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. It's crazy and takes a lot of guts to do something like that. Now were you able to find your birth father too, or only
Yep.
him?
They were together.
They were together. They were still together.
They had all five children together. They had lived together. He had been married previously, so Italy, that time, no divorce and obviously no birth control. And so they were not allowed to be married, which is part of the reason that all the children who were acknowledged had them only the mother's name. I think it was in 1988 when the law changed in Italy and children were able to take the father's name. So now my older siblings have the name of the father. Pardon me. So it must have been difficult for them socially, as status wise, because they were probably outcasted, rejected.
Yeah, sure. That sounds like that. Yeah, I mean that's like a crazy thing. So now I know you're working on a movie, Il mio posto a tavola, and we're going to show a little clip of that. But before we show the clip, why don't you set that up a little bit?
Sure. It's a documentary film. I've made a number of films and I do theater. My career was teaching business at a college, but my avocation was always theater and film. And I'm working with a person I've worked with and collaborated with for 15 years on different projects. We have our own separate projects, but we've done a lot together. And what you do in documentary filmmaking, not much different in any kind of independent filmmaking. You have to make a film to make a film. You have to make a film to get funding to make a film. So this piece that we're going to look at is a 5-minute, what's called a work in progress. And it gives you a little flavor of the story, the style, and some of the conflict or some of the concerns that will be addressed so that potential funders could see if they think it's, number one, can they finish this film? And number two, is it something that we would support? So that's what we're going to see.
The first thing I remember remembering was being told that I was adopted. I was about 4 years old. I remember saying, okay, are you going to give me back? And they said, no, you're ours forever. I had all I needed to know. Everything I needed and most of what I wanted. In 1959 through 1965, the number of Italians that were adopted as babies to the United States was around 3,700. And I was among those. What I learned later was that this was part of this, what was called the baby scoop era. It was a time when unmarried mothers were actually pressured or forced or coerced into giving up their children. I came over to New York City on Pan Am Flight 155 with kind of a cohort of other children, other babies. I was about 11 months, 3 weeks. For me, adoption is a wonderful gift. It was an opportunity that opened doors that I would never have had I not been adopted. At the same time, the first thing you know about being an adopted child is that you were abandoned. With abandonment comes insecurity, constantly second guessing. It comes feeling left out or feeling like you don't belong because you didn't belong. I was born in an orphanage in Aosta, Italy, and remained there for about a year until my adoption. My older two siblings lived in the Instituto for a while as well, but eventually they went home. I have two younger siblings who were also adopted. You can't just throw away a baby. You can't just act like it doesn't exist. I guess you can. We know now that infants separated from their mothers at birth suffer lifelong trauma. During college, I started searching. After a lot of research, I was able to actually meet my bio parents and the siblings in Italy.
A cena, ti ricordi, con Giorgio?
Sì. That one thing I said to her is, I said, do you remember that the first time we met, you said that we always be together, like sempre insieme, no matter what happened. Grief is a really odd thing. My parents, as they aged, their health conditions presented a lot more challenges, and as the only child, my focus was really on helping them get through. They passed in 2020 and 2021, and all through that I had my cherished dog, Raphael, who passed in 23. After Rafi died, I had this revelation that my everyday family was gone. It probably opened up a lot of delayed grief in some ways, and it went to a pretty dark place. Hey, how's it going? Who we got today that needs some loving?
You need to take a look at Francesca.
In my search for healing, I started volunteering at the animal shelter, working to make dogs adoptable. I know, it's kind of ironic.
Let's go for a walk.
Il mio posto a tavola in English is my place at the table. Everybody has a place, not just a seat at the table, but their place that they belong at that table. I've realized that to get through this, I need to reconnect with my Italian family, including two of my siblings who were also adopted. I'm going back to Italy in search of that feeling of wholeness, to bring together what for so long has been splintered. I don't know what I'll find, but maybe we can all find our place at the table. We all want to belong. We all want to fit in, to be a part of something, some group, some community, some family. That's our strength, that's our foundation. That's how everything else becomes possible.
Okay, well that was super, and so so how do if anybody's interested in helping fund the film, how would they do that? Where would they go?
Yeah. At the end of the film, you saw the website ilmiopostofilm.com is our domain, our website, and we're about 70% as of the time of our talking. About 70% of our crowdfunding goal is reached. We have some ways to go, but we're making good progress, and we're also waiting on a few possible grants that would really help our situation. And here in Pennsylvania, as with many states, there's what they call a film tax credit. So that if you, for example, in PA, if you spend 60% of your budget in the state of Pennsylvania, then you are able to apply for this tax credit, which then could give you back up to 25% of your budget. And I've never worked with tax credits. I mean, I've worked with these programs, but essentially, I guess you have a broker who then sells these credits to businesses for a slight fee that we would pay, but then we wind up with money that supports the film. And usually, what people do is they often use the tax credit funding to pay back the investor, which usually is the filmmaker. So it's, we're trying to tell a story here that certainly emanates from my story, but and that's great for people who know and love me, will love it. But that's not really enough to be a compelling film. Our hope is that this conversation that we spark about finding your place, about where you belong, and some of the challenges that people experience in the way of trying to find where they belong. For some people, it might be addiction and substance abuse. For others, it might be anxiety. So there's so many different reasons that people might find, that we get in our own way, or other situations that we haven't been able to control. I always say that for me, adoption was a really wonderful gift, and yet, not but and it was also, as I reflected on over the years, it had also brought a lot of challenges to my development, and a lot of challenges to who I am, to how I interact, and how much I feel like I have to pay back because I'm so grateful for what I had. I want to show you, I have a little picture. This was really what started it. I don't know if you can see it too well, but it's my parents on one picture and my dog on the other picture. What really started this part of the journey, because I think it's a lifelong journey, but what started this part of the journey was last year. So I lost my mom in 20, right before COVID, lost my dad in 21, sort of towards the end, and not from COVID, from Parkinson's, and my dog of 12 years in August of 23. And the grief was really palpable and powerful, and I expected it, but I guess I didn't expect it the way it happened. And so my realization was my everyday family was gone. And I was taking care of everybody. I was taking care of mom and dad. I moved back home to take care of them. We had wonderful angel of a caregiver to help me and help them. But I was a primary caregiver. And then I was taking care of the dog, of Raphael, my dog, who actually took care of me. And so I wake up to this new reality, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I got to start taking care of me. And it took a little while, because I was in pretty much of a dark place to get to that place of realizing that I needed to take some proactive steps. So one of the things I decided I was going to do for this year, for 2024, was to take this journey back. And because a lot of my projects, whether they're film or theater, they have really hit on social issues and social justice and those kinds of things. I think I should document this. I think it may help other people. I think it'll help me, but I think it'll also spark conversations that, art is amazing power in getting people to talk about things, total strangers that would never have these conversations together. I just saw that with my play back in May. It was 5 different one acts together. And some of the issues were some of the same things: loneliness, substance, um, body image, things like that. And we had talkbacks after, and people in the audience stayed to talk and talked about their lives and talked about things that really happened, and how they loved having an outlet, an ability to, a safe place to kind of share this. So I'm a absolute passionate believer in the power of film, particularly too, to be able to spark those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm dying to know. So you come back from Italy after meeting your birth family, your birth parents, and what do you say to your parents?
Ah, yes, thank you. Yeah, I came back that trip, and I said on the way back from JFK, I'll never forget. So I said to my mom, I said, "Well, I took a little side trip to Italy," and she's like, "I kind of figured." I said, "I met my brother and sister, and I also met their parents, pronouns, their parents." And that was how I framed it. I framed it, I was looking for siblings, which I was. I was looking for answers about health and things like that. I wasn't looking for parents. I was glad that I found them. My respect for the choice that they made, definitely. Um, and yet I didn't feel a closeness. They've since passed as well. And I felt sadness and empathy for my siblings for losing their parents. I didn't feel, the same for me until Anna and Sam passed. So I always framed it in a way that I was trying to, because even rationally, and maybe you can share from your perspective, but as rational as my parents are and were about this, the emotional piece is a little uncertain, a little scary. It's like, will he want to go back and will he disavow, all these silly things that would never happen. But I get how you could think and be insecure or be concerned. I don't know if
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And my daughter, she from when she was probably, I don't know, 13 or 14, wanted to meet her birth parents because the same thing, we told them very early age. And in Florida, um, the adoptee and the birth parents could register. And when you're 18, you could go to the registry and if both parties have, signed up, you could meet them. So about 16, she came to us and said she had a friend who did this and that. And I said, well, but you're not 18 yet. You have to wait. You have to lost at 18, you register. So when she was 18, she registered and they weren't there. Neither one of her birth parents had registered. So I said, okay. I said, if you want to find them, we'll see what we could do. So we got a private investigator, and it's a couple of $100. It really wasn't expensive. So from early on, she wanted to know. My son could care less. I mean, we used to ask him, Nicole found out, do you want to? No, no, no. And then it was probably, I want to say now, it was before COVID. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, uh, his sister um, did ancestry and contacted me.
Wow.
She had the DNA match. And she said, I'm Matthew's sister and I'd like to meet him. And I said, well, he's a grown man. I have to ask him, it's up to him. So I asked him and he said yes. And so he since then met his birth parents and they have a relationship with them. They talk back and forth or whatever. But to your point, I was never really that concerned about it, but I think that's just the way I am. Um, my wife was always concerned about it, a little bit. And I used to tell her, I said, look, you know, you're still her mother. You're always going to be her mother, and don't worry about it. And um, but I think to your point, the relationships are different. No question about it. And Nicole shortly, boy, it was less than a year after she met her birth, and then, her parents were obviously much younger than us.
Mhm.
Probably about a year after she met her birth parents, her birth father passed away. And so she was impacted by that a little bit. But on the other hand, on the one hand, it's, you have kind of like almost, I guess, two sets of parents, right? Uh, and to your point also, it is important because of health type of things and stuff like that, so
Yeah, but I
it
mean,
is good to
wanting
know.
to know who you look like,
Yeah,
it's human, right?
yeah.
Or what possible disease but it's so wonderful how you handled your children's expectations because you let them choose, and both choices were good. Not wanting to, I totally respect somebody who chooses not to want to. It's fine. I have a really close friend, and for most of her life, she didn't want to know, and then later in life, she decided she knew. It's really up to the person. So good on you and your wife for the way you approach that, because there is a guilt. Maybe it's the Italian Catholic thing coming out, but there is a sense of strong guilt that I didn't want to offend. I didn't want to hurt. I didn't want to embarrass. I didn't want to do any of those things because of how much I loved my parents. And I felt I had a right and it was okay and appropriate to find these answers because my intention was not to hurt them. My intention was to get answers.
Well,
The
yeah,
other
sure.
thing,
And like you said, you want to know who you look like. I mean, same thing with Nicole. She didn't know that she had any brothers or sisters, or Matthew did. I mean, you know, so we're not going to be here forever. I mean, we adopted the kids when we were in our 40s. So,
yeah,
they have their blood sisters and brothers, and they have their, adopted sister and brother. So, it's important, but to your point, everybody has to make their own choice like
yeah.
everything else,
I
right?
see, I see it as an enlarged family rather than separate families.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I'm struggling with now, because for the most of my life, it's been two worlds, two families, very distinct and separate. And I'm trying to maybe find my place at my table where everybody's there, And the other thing I'm learning is that it does not matter if you have a great adoption, a challenging or difficult adoption, or something in between. The things that the types of things that I express and the types of feelings and the types of insecurities, the research and also just talking with others adoptees seems it's consistent. It's pervasive. Those kinds of things have to do with being adopted, regardless of how good you have it. And I had probably one of the best adoptions you could have.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. Like you said, I relate to it, from the other side. So it's a little bit different, but um, I've of course did once we found out who they are, being a DNA nut, I had to do all their ancestry.
Oh, wow.
And my son is actually, my wife is half Italian, half Puerto Rican, and his father's Puerto Rican, and they're fifth cousins.
Nah,
Uh, and
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Wow.
unlike the Italians, and I mentioned this just the other day too in an interview,
Uh-huh.
every Puerto Rican's done their ancestry.
Really?
Italians in Italy don't do ancestry, but
No,
what
no.
my wife has, Jesus, 10, 20,000 cousins. I mean, they're coming out of the woodwork.
That's
And
fun.
I don't find anybody in Italy. I'm so jealous that she's got all of these people popping up.
Right. That's so
And
cool.
yeah, and in Nicole's case, I was able to trace her back. She's direct from Daniel Boone and Captain Morgan the pirate, and she's also a cousin, 16 times removed or something like that from Princess Diana. She's got the Spencer going way, way back.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Her, her,
interesting
her
about
parents, her birth parents' families came here in the, late 1600s, early 1700s.
so I have a friend whose mother is a descendant of Daniel Boone, and Daniel Boone had a homestead here in Berks County.
Yes, yeah.
So it's got a while. There's a lot of that's really exciting. That's
Yeah,
really
and she's direct. He's a direct grandfather of hers.
wow.
So I said to her, I said, you know, you descend from Daniel Boone. You know, they don't teach the kids any history
No,
anymore.
I say,
She's like-
who's that?
She was, who's that? I was like, oh my God, what did they tell you in school? I mean,
All
we
those-
grew up with Daniel Boone on television, David Crockett on
right,
all
right,
that stuff. So yeah,
right. That's
uh,
too funny.
yeah, it was very funny. But you know, her birth family. I mean, they never did any research or anything like that. So when I started finding some of that stuff out, and she also has an Italian great grandfather back to Italy back at the time of Henry VIII. There was a family of musicians, the Bassano brothers, and they went to England and they were musicians for Henry VIII's court.
Wow.
And he married an English woman, and through that English line, she's got this Italian connection back to I guess the 1500s or whatever it was, whenever he was
That's
around.
fascinating. That's so cool.
Yeah. So it was, that kind of stuff was really, really pretty interesting. Well, this has been great fun. I mean, I love doing these stories where people first were born in Italy, but the adoption thing and all of that.
Yeah.
It's so nice, and I get, so many people like to hear these stories because it's really, really great, and we look forward to the movie being finished, and
Yes.
me, you, and John have to get on someday, talk about it.
Absolutely. I would love to share it with you and talk about it again when we're finished. So probably our projected timeline is when we come back in October, then to do post, and then hopefully by early 25 to be ready to start screening.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you release it, we'll definitely do it again and introduce it. That's
Excellent.
for sure.
Well, thanks so much, Bob. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.